Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly class of Florida Friendly Landscaping. We're here on a Tuesday today, and joining me today is Dr. William Lester from Hernando County Extension. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Lily. How are you?
I am fabulous. How are you?
I'm just great.
We've got a lot of people pouring in today, and that's great. I do have some things I've noticed. I'm not that much in control of the Zoom. There are entities above me that control the major settings. So I see we have closed captions. So that's a welcome addition to our programs. And the chat seems to have disappeared. I'm going to look into that to see if I can bring it back or what happened to it. But the guests who are joining us today, as I said at the very, very, very end, the last slide, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a really hard question of Dr. Lester, please feel free to. But today we're going to go ahead and get started with learning about reading weeds. And that is plural. So if you thought this might be about another subject, you're still welcome to join us. But how certain weeds, not all weeds, but certain weeds in our landscape that they may be aggravating us, but they're actually there to tell us a story. So let's find out what they're trying to tell us. I am Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities. And this is my email here. If you want to save up your questions, Bill, if you can watch that. I keep letting people in, but if you can, I'd appreciate it. As I said, I work for Hernando County Utilities. Here's my email, lillyb@hernandocounty.us. And Dr. Lester's is right down here too, wlester@UFL, University of Florida, .edu, because he educates us. So feel free after this to email your questions, or if you'd like a PDF copy of this, as always, please email me and I will be glad to send you a PDF copy of this program. And it is being recorded, so it'll be available later today on my Facebook page and within a few days, maybe a little longer because of the holiday. And I understand government broadcasting is out at the landfill doing exciting things today. So maybe a few days, but it'll be on YouTube as well. Hernando County Government YouTube. These are the 9 principles of Florida friendly landscaping. And what we're going to cover a lot today is number 1, right plant, right place. And we think about that with our preferred plants, but definitely weeds have got that principle down. They grow where it is appropriate for them to grow. We may not feel that it's an appropriate place. It may not be where we want it to be. That's kind of the definition of a weed, but it's going to grow where the site conditions are correct for that particular plant to grow. So first, let's talk about what is a weed. What does that mean? What is a weed? So I'm moving some things around that you can't see that I can, but is blocking my view of the slide. Native plants, they're often considered weeds. And I do have programs where I have the link to it here. It's found on Hernando County Government YouTube. Are the weeds or wildflowers? You know, so that's a question out there all the time. Here's just some wonderful native plants that often get categorized by us as weeds, but they're out there doing fantastic things for the environment. This Florida green eyes here pops up, dry sandy areas. Frog fruit, one of its many names, turkey, tangle, fog fruit, frog fruit, matchhead weed, all sorts of names. And it creeps its way into lawns. It's creeped its way into my lawn, and I never put it there. But look at, how many lawns do you know attract butterflies like this? And this fog fruit attracts 2 other types of tiny little butterflies as well. I think it's a great addition. Fleabane, you know, these that we overlook all the time, but the nice flat head for small native bees to land on. This Virginia creeper, I'm sure it grows in any kind of conditions. It is not poison ivy. Now, don't go rolling around in it to test that fact, but Virginia creeper has 5 leaves, except for the really young ones. Does look a little different than poison ivy. And that would be another class. Maybe Dr. Lester and I will talk about poison plants one of these days. Prickly pear. This is a great food for the gopher tortoise. It creates an incredibly beautiful yellow flower. Ranchers don't particularly like it in their fields, and you can see why. And I have, you know, a grandson when he comes over who runs through the yard and claims each one of these that I happen to have, jumps up and attacks him. So it all depends, you know, what it is that you're looking for in your plants. This over here, this Biden's alba, Spanish needle, it will put those little beggar ticks all over you. And people get really aggravated with it. It grows very aggressively. But I have it, didn't put it there, but I have it, and I don't have the heart to 100% get rid of it because it is a pollinator's dream. You go out there and look at it at any time, except in the dead of winter when it's frozen back. And it is attracting native bees, butterflies, parasitic wasps, all kinds of things all over it. Here's another thing that you're going to tell me that's flat out weed too, but it's a sage and it's got the tubular flowers and it's going to attract pollinators. So sometimes we need to adjust our mindset when we're thinking about what we're calling a weed. A lot of them have a lot of good benefits and attributes. So basically the definition of a weed is a plant growing where a human doesn't want it. That is what we call a weed. I always say a weed is a matter of opinion. It could be a very nice plant, except there are exceptions. When we are talking about an invasive exotic pest plant. And what's funny is a lot of the very nice native, or at least, you know, beneficial, Florida friendly plants that get categorized as weeds are not at all invasive exotics. And a lot of the landscape plants that even you can find in big box stores that we think, oh, this is going to make a great addition to our yard, actually end up being invasive exotic plants. So when I am today, I'm just for clarification, letting you know if I discuss a weed, I am not talking about an invasive exotic plant. I'm talking about a plant that we have decided is not good enough to be in our yard or where we want to landscape. That is what I'm referring to, not these invasive exotic plants. And I do have classes on those. There we go. I do have classes on invasive exotic weeds. Welcome, Sid. Thank you for joining us. Also in Hernando County Government YouTube and on my Facebook, you can look up Seductive Invaders. And there we discuss plants that people are in love with, but it's kind of an unhealthy, toxic relationship because those plants have an unhealthy, toxic relationship with the environment. And then I have another follow-up class on that called This, Not That, which suggests wonderful native plants in replacement of some of the exotic pest plants. But today we're focusing on what people call weeds that are not really harmful type of plants. They just may be growing where we don't want them to be growing. A lot of them are opportunistic, so they're going to be anywhere and everywhere. but we're going to concentrate on some of them, which really follow Florida Friendly Landscaping Principle number 1. They follow that right plant, right place. They only grow in certain conditions. We call them indicator weeds. And so therefore, because they only grow in these certain conditions, they're going to tell us something about our landscape. You know, they're going to tell us what's going on there by their mere presence. So some of these plants can tell you things about the nitrogen, maybe, in your landscape, or the pH level, or the moisture level in your landscape. Some of them, one of them anyway, is an indicator plant that grows well when nothing else will in the presence of parasitic nematodes. So let's take a walk through there and see what these weeds are trying to tell us. Red sorrel. I don't imagine many of us listening here from Hernando County or Central Florida have get to see a lot of this, because this usually indicates a low pH. Now there are areas, maybe in the more oak hammock regions of our state, where you could be experiencing a low pH issue. It's not going to be a common issue. Please don't go to the big box store and buy lime to sweeten your soil like you used to do up north. We're built on limestone. That's what we are. Still the biggest, economic driver of Hernando County are the rock mines. Plenty of lime, plenty of phosphates, plenty, are almost all of the place we're going to have a 6 or higher type of pH. If it happens to be low, and of course there are microclimates in different places. So if you happen to have a low pH and you have this sorrel, this red sorrel growing, you might think, oh, let me try and raise the pH, which maybe you could, but there is a better option in that is your opportunity to get those plants, those acid-loving plants that like a low pH. A lot of our areas, like I said, are going to be a medium to a high pH. But if you find areas, and it's like I said, it's usually going to be under an oak hammock or something like that, that has the lower pH, has this red sorrel growing, then it's time to celebrate your plants that also enjoy a low pH, such as, blackberries, gardenias, azaleas. That's why you always see them growing the best under oak trees. Camellias, ixora even. Blueberries, they do enjoy a low pH, but don't think just because you have this weed telling you it's a low pH there that you can just go ahead and plant some blueberries. Blueberries are a lot more difficult than that. They do need a low pH. They need a very low pH, where our blueberry farmers, if you notice, you see them growing like up on berms, which almost are entirely made of pine bark. And they also, and we'll see a key in a little bit of what pH does, what its job kind of does. And you'll see that there are other elements that become hard to get, the lower the pH. So therefore, sometimes the blueberries, suffer that way, or they may get too much boron, so it's always a balancing act there. But these are plants to consider when you realize, oh, got a low pH here. What we're trying to do is, instead of fighting against what you have, instead of that, listen to what those plants are telling you, those indicator weeds, and work with it. So we often see these different types of plantains out there. Whether or not which plantains are edible and which ones aren't, that's not this class today, and I'm certainly not knowledgeable about that. We do have a listener who is, but that's not what our class is about today, but we're used to seeing this as weeds. This is, probably more common for us. And it could be indicating a high pH. These plantains are only going to grow where the pH is pretty high. Sometimes it's the only thing growing out there, if pH is really high. So some people think, okay, well, then I'll just lower the pH. That is next to impossible. Think about our sandy soil and how quickly, everything filters through it. So if you add, different things to try and lower that pH, that is going to be such a temporary fix. If you want to try and make your hydrangeas blue enough, the pH low enough, very, very temporary fix. So if you have such pH finicky plants that need, lower, sometimes you are a lot better off putting them in pots. But say you see these and you think, okay, well, I probably have a pretty high pH going on. What can I do about that? You can. There are several plants out there that actually prefer a high pH. And how I picked out these plants is I looked through a Florida friendly plant guide to plant selection and design. And I looked at the key. Now I've been using this book for years and never really paid attention that there's a pH key in this book as well. And it's one of these that has just the dots. It's kind of hard to see, but see just the dots there. If the dots are on the higher side, these are the plants that I picked out that, will do well in a high pH, which is the Florida privet, Simpson stopper, shield fern, muley grass, and aloe. Don't think those are your only choices, because the other thing that happens with these dots here, I'll show you this one. See all 4 dots? That means this southern red cedar can grow in a multiple amount of pH conditions. So there's going to be a whole lot more of those plants. But these are the ones that specifically said they enjoy a high pH condition. So muley grass, pretty easy to get too, as well as aloes. Okay. So it's a good idea to listen to these weeds, but you also want some verification. So soil tests are always a good idea, and you can get those by calling the extension office or emailing Dr. Lester, and they can walk you through how to do a soil test. If you only want to do the pH test, I think it's still only $3 per packet. And that way, you'll know the pH of what you're dealing with. And the county extension office, they'll send you to a form that you can pull off online, fill it out. You can get one of those fancy bags from them, or you can use, an old lunch bag. It has to be a paper bag though. And mail it. You'll mail it to the Soils Lab in Gainesville. You'll get results, and the county extension office will get a copy of your results. So if you don't understand what they're saying, just give them a call. Dr. Lester or a Master Gardener volunteer will be glad to walk you through what that report is telling you. You can also get tested for other nutrients as well, and I believe that's $10 now. When I'm talking about pH, why is it so important? What does this, mean in our landscapes? Well, the pH, it's important for many things. It's important in soil, it's important in water, it's important in our bodies, it's important in lots of places. But in the soil, here is why it becomes so important for us. So here, This is a 4 pH, that which is pretty low. 10, really, really, really high. And here's the different nutrients. And as you can see by the shapes they're giving you, at a 4, nitrogen is just pretty much not available. See, pH acts as a key that unlocks different nutrients, but different levels of pH depend on how much of the, various nutrients that it may unlock. This high one just lets iron pour on through. But, that's not necessarily a healthy area either. So, and as you can see, as you get higher, you're not going to have much nitrogen at all. You're going to have a heck of a lot of phosphorus and potassium and sulfur. But the key is, you want as much to equal amounts to all of this as you can get to have the most healthy, or what we call neutral 7. And then you pretty much can get a good amount of everything. I would say, in my experience, if you're going to send that bag of soil to Gainesville, to the University of Florida, looking for your pH level in your yard, I'm going to say it's probably around a 6.5, which is still, pretty good. You still have the ability to unlock a good amount of these nutrients. That's just what I have seen that, most people are somewhere in between 6 and 7. But of course, there are different, there are anomalies in everything. I know Dr. Lester spoke to a gentleman about a year ago who had well over an 8. I'm not sure if he was living inside of the rock mine or what was going on there, but he's going to have a, difficult time of it. Bahia grass won't do well in those high pH conditions. So this is why pH is important to us. Legumes. Let's say the weeds that you have in your yard. Maybe you have some kind of clover, these beggar weeds, black medic is right here. Even sunshine mimosa. Don't get mad at me. I love sunshine mimosa. I'm growing sunshine mimosa on purpose too. It's a wonderful native plant. But in some instances, in some places, they consider it a weed. And it can be aggressive once it starts growing. But if you've got nothing really else growing in your yard except some kind of legumes, that's talking to you very loudly, telling you there's hardly any nitrogen in this yard. And the only plants that are able to deal with that, because they have the ability to fix nitrogen with the chemicals that their roots put out, they make nitrogen available to them, even in the most nitrogen poor soil. So that might be telling you something as well. So what would be the solution to that? You could add more nitrogen, but I say that very, very, very hesitantly, because I don't want you over fertilizing. And that becomes a balancing act as well. Easier than doing that, add more legumes. Why not? That sunshine mimosa I showed you, beautiful plant. Let it continue to grow. This is a non-native, a perennial peanut. Also, beautiful spreading plant. You want to make sure that you get the ones I think that you want the ones that spread by seed, not by the rhizomes, because you, your neighbors, and everyone else might have perennial peanut if you get the wrong one. But sometimes they call it eco-turf, but make sure you get it that, it's going to stay put where you want it and not spread too much. Another way is adding organic matter to that soil. Instead of just putting a, chemical fertilizer or something down, put down organic matter. There's compost, but you want to be careful before you put down compost. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. we learned in a class last week that Dr. Lester invited Dr. Eben Bean to come and talk to us about a project that he has been working on for years now about adding compost to new construction to the fill dirt. He says you want to make sure that it looks like dirt, that it doesn't look like compost, that it's really completely finished. And you can buy products like that. And you can put it down before you put down a new lawn. You can put it down as a top dressing, like a fertilizer, even after you have a new lawn. So adding that organic matter, what it does is improves the nutrient holding capacity and the moisture holding capacity of your soil. And that eventually, over time, might help create more nitrogen in that soil. Here's another, this is a winter annual. Don't get excited about it saying bluegrass, because this particular bluegrass is not the, the hybridized nice bluegrass that is not going to grow here anyway. So this is annual bluegrass. I think sometimes it might be called POA or something like that. I just put this in as one of the examples. This would be a winter weed in our lawns, but there are other types of weeds in our lawn, crabgrass, other types of grassy weeds, and they're not necessarily caused by nature. These are caused by cultural activities, meaning we are mowing too low. Interesting, isn't it? So that is a great, that would be great news, because that's easily fixable. Your lawn should be mowed at 3.5 to 4 inches. You see this lawn here is probably, the lawn guy was up and down saying he is mowing it at 3.5 to 4 inches, but if you look, nope. And it is imperative for the health of your lawn that you keep it mowed at 3.5 to 4 inches. It really, really is. If everyone just did that, they'd have a lot less weeds, a lot less disease problems, because the lawn would be overall more healthy. It is a plant that is supposed to be that tall, at least Floratam, St. Augustine lawns, and Bahia lawns. Some of your zoysia grasses, no, they're supposed to be shorter. But if you have a Floratam, a lawn, or a Bahia grass lawn, Dr. Lester and I cannot stress to you how important it is to keep it mowed at 3.5 to 4 inches. That creates a longer root system, and it is just so much better for the overall health of the lawn. Okay, here's our weed that talks to us very specifically. So we're going to call this a scientist weed, because it's talking to us about some nematodes, plant parasitic nematodes. This Florida pusley doesn't care about the nematodes that some of the other plants succumb to. So if there's a lot of this Florida pusley and not much of anything else, you may realize, oh, I have a nematode problem in the soil. What are nematodes? They are microscopic type worms that feed on the roots. Some of them feed on other parts of the plant. And, they get in there and they destroy plants. So what do? Now, some nematodes are beneficial, but the ones that this Florida pusley is telling you about could be the plant parasitic nematodes. What do we do about that? Several things you can do if you believe you have a nematode problem. You can get into real expensive fixes, but there's easy fixes as well. Soil solarization. A lot of these things are what we do like for vegetable gardens that may have a nematode problem. But you can do it with other parts of your yard as well. What does soil solarization mean? It means you're going to get down some clear plastic in the non-growing season and hold it down there and let it stay, I think about 6 weeks, and let that sun just bake away all those nematodes in there. You can also, just like we were talking about with the low nitrogen yards, organic amendments, different types of compost. You can buy compost products out there. You can buy composted cow manure. You can buy a product called Command with 1M, which we don't know all their ingredients, but it's all composted material. And it works really well, especially with those new lawns. You can look for plants that are nematode resistant. A lot of them will have a sign, will indicate, especially your vegetable plants, that this is a nematode resistant one. Or you can even plant some cover crops. This is a majorly high ryegrass cover crop here. I don't think you'll let it get that high with your lawn. And you can only grow ryegrass in the winter here. But Dr. Lester can tell you about other different cover crops for different areas. And what that does is you're offering different food. So therefore, the pests that wanted the other type of food are going to move on. That's kind of what tricking the pests, if you're not planting the same thing, same place all of the time. So, let's see. Ruth Brass is another plant that is going to tell you that the site conditions are too compacted and wet. And you see what it looks like in a normal lawn. That's sometimes called silvergrass or crowfoot. You can look at it and see it kind of looks like a crow's foot, and that, may be aggravating to you. So, but what that's telling you is this soil is really hard, really compacted, and I'm the only thing that can get my roots pushed through it, but I also like it pretty wet. So it's telling you those things too. What do you do, about if your yard is too compacted? That's a pretty major thing. And as I was discussing, Dr. Lester should have that class up soon on YouTube, Hernando County Government YouTube, that discusses your soil, your landscape from the ground up. And these projects that he's been working on at the university are that before they put down new sod, they get that compost product and they till it in. Because when you buy a new house, and this is happening all around me, houses are being built all over around me, that, they just clear everything out. Like in 2 hours, every tree or everything is ever there is gone. And they bring in fill dirt from somewhere else. And the fill dirt comes from way deep down in the ground, no topsoil whatsoever, and no nutrients whatsoever. They throw that down. They've had construction equipment on it for however long it took to build the house. So it's become compacted. And then they throw a lawn and some landscapes plants on it and say, grow and be beautiful. Very, very, very difficult. The compacted soil, for one thing, the roots have a hard time pushing through. And then you've got basically no nutrients on top of it. So what they have been doing is this research in Marion County on top of the world, where they're tilling in this organic matter and this compost before they put the lawn down and the landscape. It's made a big, big, big difference. Now, if we're beyond that, and we already have our landscape, as I said, top dressing it with these compost products, composted mushrooms, even, as I said, manure, the Command product, something like those, top dress them every few years. It's going to help bring that soil back to a more natural type of condition over time. It's great to do it before landscaping, but sometimes we have to do what we can afterwards. Aeration is something you can do, but that's very extensive and very expensive too. But if there's compacted areas in your yard, and it is an area that you can just create a walkway or a patio or something, maybe put that there instead of fighting that compacted soil condition. Now here's some weeds that if you have them, they might be telling you a story. They might be telling you it's pretty wet here. And I was ready to argue the one about sedges here. That's not sand spurs. Sand spurs grow in a line, a straight line. These little balls here are never going to get hard and pokey and hurt you. That's just what they look like. These are sedges. Sedges have edges. They're triangular shaped. And I was ready to argue, what do you mean that's a water-loving weed? I have it in the Royal Highlands where I live, which I affectionately call the Royal Drylands, which is, very dry and sandy. And then I realized where do I have it? Where do I have it? I have it over my drain field. So this isn't wrong. Sedges do grow where there is water. Also the same with this doveweed. Dollarweed will tell on you all day long. If you come to the extension office and you complain, I have all this dollarweed, what do I do about it? They may start asking you about your irrigation habits. Dollarweed will only grow in very wet conditions. I have seen it growing literally in lakes. Like, they look like lily pads. I mean, look at them. So they're a water-loving plant. Maybe it's not your fault. Maybe that is just a low area that happens to hold water. So we'll give you the benefit of the doubt there. But if you have dollarweed all over your lawn, that's telling you you're giving your lawn too much water. The turf doesn't even want that much lawn. You're starting to grow lily pads in your lawn. You might want to cut back on how much irrigation that you're doing. So what do you do? Like I said, cut back on that irrigation. Those indicator plants might be telling you kind of too wet here. Or if it's an area that it naturally is just very moist, holds a lot of water, use water-loving plants there. It may even be an opportunity to create a rain garden. And I have classes on that too. If you go back to Hernando County Government YouTube, I just put up a class that was only pre-recorded, so it's only on YouTube about growing rain gardens. So you might want to look back for that as well. Okay, now that I told you how to work with the weeds and what to do with them, some of you may still be insisting, I want them gone, I want them out of here. So I've invited Dr. Lester to say a few things with us. You're going to unmute yourself, Bill. There you are. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, we have two U's here now. So if you could talk to us about weed control in lawns, plant beds, vegetables, and when should you use an herbicide? When is the best time? And all of that. So if you could start with weeds in lawns.
Sure, that's kind of a big question and a big topic. Basically, with weeds in lawns, very important that you manage your lawn correctly. So, for starters, you need to know what type of grass you have, whether it's Bahia, St. Augustine, maybe you have Zoysia or Bermuda. You need to know what kind of lawn you have, because if you do have a problem with weeds and you have to get an herbicide, herbicides are labeled for certain types of lawn. You can't use something that's labeled to be used in St. Augustine and Bahia grass because it may completely kill your Bahia. So you have to know what type of grass you have before you can even go shopping for a weed killer. For people with very small numbers of weeds, it's probably best and easiest if you just learn to live with them. Maybe go out, and if you only have 1 or 2 weeds, obviously pull it by hand. You don't have to go out there and get some kind of chemical spray and mix it up. And these things are not cheap either. Herbicides can be very expensive depending on what size bottle you get. But really management and some of the things that Lilly touched on, certain weeds that thrive in really wet areas. If you have a lot of dollar weed in your St. Augustine lawn, you're watering it too much. Cut back on the water. The St. Augustine will still do okay, but the dollar weed will not like it. So it's going to slow down the dollar weed. And then if you do use some type of weed killer on it, it gives you a chance to get on top of the situation. In flower beds, it's definitely easiest to pull the weeds by hand. Very tricky to spray weed killers around other plants, because even if you have just the slightest breeze out there, when you're spraying something, it could carry that spray to go and hit one of your valuable plants, one of the plants that you want to keep, that you don't want to kill or get rid of. So when people start spraying around azaleas and hedge bushes and flowers, very, very difficult. Vegetable gardens is definitely best to just hand pull the weeds. Like I said, there are a lot of effective herbicides on the market. Many of them can be used in lawns, but you have to know what type of lawn you're using it in to begin with. If you have a lawn that's half Bahia and half St. Augustine, and people will tell us that, you're pretty limited, because different herbicides will not harm one or not harm the other, but it's probably going to harm one or the other. So herbicides work best if you have a pure stand of Bahia or St. Augustine or Zoysia or whatever it might be. Best time to control weeds is either in the spring or the fall. Many of the herbicides that you can pick up at the lawn and garden stores, you need to read the directions very carefully. Many of them you cannot use when the average daytime temperature is above 85, 90. The label is going to say the exact number. And right now, we're there. Average daytime temperature is above 80, above 85. So what happens is, if you use an herbicide on your lawn in the middle of summer when it's very hot, even though that herbicide most of the year you can put it down safely, it'll kill the weeds and won't kill your lawn. If you use it when it's very hot, it may kill your lawn. And we speak with a few people every summer that don't read the directions. They buy like a weed and feed product or the wrong herbicide, spray it in the middle of July and August when it's like, what, 100 degrees out. It hits 100 degrees in the afternoon and their entire lawn will die. So be very, very careful about the temperature restrictions on herbicides. Homemade products don't work very well on weeds. And I know I have seen the recipe all over Facebook a million times for using vinegar and Epsom salt and Dawn dishwashing liquid, a couple other things in there. Grocery store vinegar is not acidic enough to kill weeds very well. If you spray it on little tiny newly sprouted weeds, it will kill them, but it doesn't kill them down to the roots. So in a week or so, they're just going to grow right back. There are types of vinegar that you can buy online and that commercial growers use that are very acidic, but you have to be careful. You don't want to breathe it in, can't get it in your eyes, don't want to get it on your skin. So you need to wear the appropriate protective equipment, whatever it says to on the label. Even it will work on weeds, but only temporarily. Won't kill them down to the roots. So they'll come back pretty quickly. Generally, putting vinegar on your lawn does not generally harm the environment or anything else. It may kill your grass during the summer, during the heat. I can't guarantee that it wouldn't. But you really don't want to be using things as a pesticide or an herbicide that aren't pesticides and herbicides. You really, we caution people to try to stay away from the homemade. You know, grandma used this, and I saw this on Facebook, because not everything you see on Facebook is necessarily accurate. And weed and feed products do not work well here in Florida, because here you want to do your weed control in the late winter, very, very early spring, like generally February. And here in Hernando County, we have a fertilizer ordinance. You're not allowed to fertilize during January, February, and March. So here in Florida, we control weeds at a different time of year than when we fertilize. Weed and feeds may work fine in other states, Michigan, Ohio, maybe Pennsylvania, I'm not sure. But here in Florida, they don't work very well. And I've never seen them do a very effective job on controlling weeds either. They tend to be very expensive. So you're paying top dollar for something that is going to fertilize your lawn probably at the wrong time of year and not do a very good job on the weeds. So Lily, I know you misplaced your little chat box.
Yes.
So people can't put questions in through chat.
I don't think I misplaced it. I think it has been misplaced for me.
Oh, don't blame it on other people. You misplaced it. You need to look a little harder. I'm sure you can find it.
Okay, well, you can come over and show me where it is.
Oh, I don't know what you did. I can't help fix this one. I've never had that happen to me, so it's a new one on me.
Okay, yes, but we'll wait to the very end, and if someone has
Okay.
a question there, we'll address that then. So, in summary, instead of trying to fight the conditions that the indicator weeds are telling us about, it's always better, to work with them than to try and fight them. If, like this dollar weed here, as I said, if you look at them, I want you to see lily pads and think, I'm trying to grow something, in a pond out here. So perhaps I'm adding too much water. If it's in a low area where there already is water, accept it as a great plant. It's edible. So that's pennywort. Also then put in other water loving plants in that area to help kind of soak up a lot of the water that you might be experiencing there. Or it may even be a great place for a rain garden. If you have low pH conditions, then celebrate that by planting your azaleas and your camellias and your ixoras and all those acid-loving plants. You have a high pH, those ones that I told you about, the muley grass, aloe, Simpson stopper, there were several others. They actually like a really high pH, but also understand in both of those conditions, there are a lot of plants out there that do well in varying pH conditions. So, your options are higher than what we just told you there too. And if you think you might have some nematode issues, treating for nematodes is extremely difficult and expensive, isn't it, Dr. Lester?
Homeowners don't have a whole lot of options open to them, and even commercial growers have fewer options than they did a number of years ago.
So using these cultural ways of doing it, the solarizing it, utilizing cover crops, adding more organic material to try and change it, that is how you can handle those conditions. And like I said, if it's too wet, then reduce that irrigation or, work with it, put in plants that like to have a lot of water. But the main thing, and I say this on almost every class, and Dr. Lester and I are really, really good at this in our yards, aren't we?
What's that?
We embrace imperfection. And as he was talking about with lawns, neither one of us are concerned about weeds in our lawns. He has a mandate by his wife that she doesn't want to see dirt. Therefore, whatever's covering the dirt, if it's green, is good. I also have what I call a diverse lawn area or a freedom lawn because I am free from worrying about it. We both have Bahia grass, but in my Bahia grass, it's like I said, it's a diverse lawn area. And actually they are doing studies and finding out that diversity is more healthy, not only for the environment, everybody knows that. It's actually healthier for your lawn, the actual growth of your lawn, to have a few weeds in it. Have you been reading about that, Dr. Lester?
No, I know that they are doing research with mixing different types of turf grass in a lawn and found that they had far fewer disease problems and other problems.
Yep. So yeah, exactly. You have a monoculture of turf or any other plant is never going to be sustainable in the long run. So diversity is always the key. So what we call weeds, which are just wild plants out there, not of course referring to the invasive exotics, they're the key to helping us get back to that diversity the way nature had it to begin with. And nature isn't perfect, so I don't feel that I have to be. I got a lot of this information and those indicator plants from this website. You can look up Reading the Weeds and put UF after it, and you will find the blog on that. There's a book out there, and I have always used it for, not for the purposes that it was intended. Weeds of Southern Turf Grasses. I've got it on there, but I have it right here too. And I guess it doesn't really give control anyway, but what it is doing is helping you ID weeds that may be in your turf or your pastures or whatever. I use it for IDing, but not because I want to get rid of the weeds, just because I wanted to know what they are. And I've always found it a useful tool. I just found out yesterday, Dr. Bill, discontinued at the IFAS, Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences bookstore.
It's been out of print for over a year. Yeah. It's very difficult to find now.
Right. So it used to be there and it used to be $14. What I would advise against, because I saw it on eBay and other various places for $60, $138, it's not worth that. But if you can find it, used for, a few bucks, it's very helpful. Sometimes you have to get over that it's a book calling these weeds, because you might get mad saying these are wildflower. It'll help you with identification of them. And also, I have a program called Weeds or Wildflowers on Hernando County Government YouTube as well. And you can find the book I showed you, the Florida Friendly Guide to Plant Selection and Design. You can find this various places. You can go to the Hernando County Master Gardener Nursery tomorrow between 8:30 and 11, and they can give you one. They're open Saturdays and Wednesdays, 8:30 to 11. Give you one in your hand. Or they have like a web tool now that you can find on your phone. It's not an app for your phone. You don't have to download it, but you can go to the site and it works great on your phone when you're at the nursery. And there you can even pinpoint it. I'm looking for yellow wildflowers or something like that, and we'll show you all the Florida friendly plants. So, and you can find that at ffl.ifas.ufl.edu. And I have upcoming classes. I will say every Thursday at 10 o'clock, Dr. Lester has a virtual plant clinic. And we have a good time there. And that's where you can really throw your impromptu questions at him. I am his regular co-host, but I'm abandoning him this Thursday. So he might be on his own. So make sure you send really, really hard questions, since I won't be there. And
we'll figure it out.
Yes. That's every Thursday at 10. You can find that on their Facebook page, the link to that. And these are just the upcoming classes. We have classes all of the time, don't we, Dr. Lester? Just every
week. We do. Hard to keep
Yeah.
on top of what we're doing week to week sometimes.
Okay. So there's our emails again. Feel free to email us questions. feel free to ask me for a copy, a PDF copy of this program. Again, it will be on Facebook probably this afternoon, the recording of it. And by next week sometime, it'll be on Hernando County Government YouTube. Now, let's see if we can control this. You do have the ability to unmute yourself, so hopefully you won't all be talking at the same time. But if you have a burning question you would like to ask right now, you can go ahead and unmute and ask that, or otherwise, okay, go ahead, Sarah, let's see. Sarah, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
So I actually did start having some dollarweed growing this year, but it was when we were in a drought, and it's in an area where my irrigation doesn't even spray, and like the other plants around it were dying from lack of water. So I'm confused at how it could be growing in an area that's got a lot of water. Is there, and I don't know what to say. Like, is there some way to further investigate that area? I don't, it's just odd that, because it was growing when it was so dry.
Bill, do you have the answer?
Weeds are extremely adaptable. So they're going to grow well in really unusually dry spots or dry times, unusually wet times. Many of them can survive and grow in a very wide range of pH and soil conditions. So weeds are by far so much more adaptable than turf grass or anything else that you're growing in your yard. That's probably why it
could have been previously a wet area, maybe even years ago. So the roots and everything were still there. And when everything else was dying out, you know, as he said, it's so adaptable, that's what managed to come up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Carlos, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm thinking about to start a vegetable garden, and I've seen like different videos how people use cardboard and wood chips to control the weeds. And I'm curious, what do you think? What do you guys think about that?
That works great. I've used quite a bit in the past cardboard in my vegetable garden, the little walkways. I'll put down cardboard and then put down mulch on top of that, whether it's grass clippings or leaves or hay or whatever it might be. And the cardboard breaks down, takes 6 to 8 months, something like that. It'll break down and eventually weeds will come through, but it completely blocks the weeds for at least 6 months. You want to be careful if you're using cardboard to remove as much of the packing tape as you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because otherwise, eventually you're going to have nothing but packing tape. The cardboard's all decomposed, and you have a lot of leftover tape in the garden. But yeah, cardboard works great. Wood chips can work very well also. Very, very fresh wood chips can be a problem sometimes. I know there's a service or a website you can go to and sign up, and tree companies will just pop by your house one day and give you a truckload of wood chips. If you use them fresh, they can, well, first of all, you get what you get. You know, if they throw some empty soda cans in there and you have poison ivy vines, whatever went in the truck, you get. And you probably want to let it sit and cure for a little bit because it can be really hot and stinky right off the bat.
Okay, but I think they're called utility wood chips, right? And is there any problems, like other problems with that, with diseases or that can occur?
Depends on what went into the truck.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get nice, clean, chipped oak, then that's great. You can get palm tree stuff. Like I said, you can get weeds and vines thrown in there. I've seen the compost that you can get, and I don't know if Hernando County does it. Seminole County used to do it years ago, where you just go to the landfill and you can pick up wood chips. And there'd be like crushed up beer cans and trash and all kinds of junk in it. And it would stink to high heaven for a few months before it kind of settled down. So it really depends on where it came from, how clean it is, how old it is.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And would you say in general that when you have a balanced soil, like everything is like balanced, then there's less chance for weeds? Is that the case?
Yes,
Like when everything is balanced, then yeah, okay.
yes. And a few things that help is in your soil, whether it be a vegetable garden, a lawn, your flower bed, whatever, you have something that's called a weed seed bank. And think of it like a bank account. And weeds make deposits into it. And you have a lot of old weed seeds in there. The more you turn over the soil, the more you're going to bring weed seeds up to close to the surface, and they're going to germinate when they're close to the surface. And the more that you let weeds grow until they flower and set more seeds, the more seeds you're going to have in your account.
Okay.
So pulling weeds early helps. Turning the soil over, letting it sit till all the weeds come up, turn it over again, do that a few times. You'll start to like drain your weed seed account. So you really want, that's an account that you really want to empty out, unlike your bank account.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Nancy, do you have a question?
Yeah, the Florida pursley or pearly that grows where there's nematodes. The question is cause and effect. If they're growing, that means there's nematodes there. If I pull the weeds out, will the nematodes go away?
No, there'll still be plenty of them in the soil.
Okay.
There's a number of them in the roots. So if you pull them up and you're very careful to get the whole root up, you're removing some nematodes, but you can't remove all of them that way.
And just because that pustule is there doesn't mean there's absolutely the nematodes there, but they do withstand having the nematodes where other plants don't.
Okay, and if my squash aren't doing really well, that would sort of suggest there's something in the soil too.
No, that's something in the air called it's too hot right now, right, Dr. Lester?
Yeah, squash season ended a couple weeks ago, middle of June.
Oh, I didn't get the memo. Thanks.
It's done. Well,
Yeah.
and a lot of times with squash and cucumbers is closer to June 1st. After that, it's an issue of the heat, humidity, the rain, the diseases, insect pests.
So they should be removed because the vines are just going to bring bugs, right?
Yes.
All right. What about tomato plants? Since it's past their season, I did get that memo.
Yeah.
And
Tomatoes finished pretty much June 15th.
so do we keep the plants in the soil, waiting for it to get cooler, or pull the plants out?
I wouldn't. It's just too difficult, and you're going to waste too many resources keeping them alive. I've got half of mine pulled out. The rest need to be pulled out, and I'm going to start fresh for this fall.
All right. And then
And fresh
4 weeks or
peppers
6
also.
weeks to solarize.
The longer, the better for solarizing.
All right.
I think 4 weeks minimum, but longer, the better.
All right. Clear plastic? Must it be
Yes.
clear or can it be black
Yes.
plastic?
Clear plastic, because
That's
you're
right.
making a little easy bake oven under the plastic, basically.
Like a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Very
Mhm.
helpful.
Okay, we'll take one more question from Jolene.
I have two questions. One is, if I've pulled the weeds, will putting mulch down help them at bay? And then also, that schedule that you put up for Mr. Lester, is there any way I can find that list for his seminars?
Yes, those were my seminars, but yes, you can find his or mine at my Facebook page, Hernando FFL program, or Extension's Facebook page, which is
Hernando EXT, but the simplest way to find all of our classes, just go to www.hernandoextension.com. And there's a full listing of all the classes I'm doing, Lily's doing, everybody else in our office is doing. They have one on scalloping, I think, coming up soon.
yeah,
And
I saw that.
another one on controlling mice and rodents in your house. So we have a
I
lot
think
of
he's
different
doing
ones.
that like right now at the same time, but you have to look for the
Oh,
recording
okay.
of it. And
Yeah,
the question
What about the mulch?
mulch, holding back weeds.
Yes, mulch will help to block the weeds.
Okay,
for a period of time. I mean, you can't
Right.
rely on it to be 100% effective, because then weed seeds are going to blow around on top of the mulch and grow there as well. So you're always having to refresh your mulch. You can't mulch once a year, basically, or it's not going to work out for you. So.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, because if nothing else, weed seeds do blow in the wind. So no matter what you do, unless you cover your property with a huge dome, you're always going to get at least some wind-blown seeds.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Lester. I'm glad I brought
thank
you
you.
here. I'm glad I brought you and your brain here with us today. And I hope everyone at least got some good ideas about how they're going to get started and just working with what nature is telling you rather than trying to fight against it. And join Dr. Lester on Thursday at 10 for the virtual plant clinic and throw all your hard questions at him. And thank you, everybody, and have a great week. Have a great 4th of July.